Don't leave, Mummy. The little girl wrapped her arms around the stranger's leg, a billionaire heiress who had been living in their farmhouse for 7 days. The farmer froze. She froze. Nobody expected what happened next, or who she really was. The sun beats down on a lonely stretch of rural highway where dust devils dance across cracked asphalt. A battered pickup truck rattles along the road, its bed loaded with crates of live chickens destined for market. Behind the wheel sits James Carter, 38 years old and weathered beyond his years, his calloused hands gripping the steering wheel with the quiet determination of a man who's learned that survival means keeping moving forward, no matter how heavy the burden. Up ahead, a sleek black sedan sits disabled on the shoulder, its hood propped open and smoke rising lazily into the cloudless sky. A woman in expensive clothes waves frantically as the truck approaches, her designer heels sinking into the soft dirt of the roadside. This is Victoria Hayes, 35, elegant even in distress, her perfectly styled hair now falling loose around her shoulders. James sees her. His jaw tightens. The truck slows for just a moment, then continues past without stopping. In his rearview mirror, he watches her face fall, her arms slowly lowering as his truck disappears down the road. James mutters to himself, convinced she's just another realtor vulture, one of those city people who swoop into struggling farm country, buying up land from desperate families and flipping it for profit. He's seen too many neighbors lose their homes to trust a stranger in expensive clothes. Hours pass. The sun begins its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. James's truck returns along the same road, the chicken crates now empty, his delivery complete. As the Carter farmhouse comes into view, a modest structure that's seen better days, but stands proud nonetheless, a small figure bursts through the front door. Emma, 9 years old, with her late mother's warm eyes and her late grandfather's stubborn spirit, runs barefoot across the yard to greet her father. She's been waiting by the window, as she does every time he makes a delivery run. James steps out of the truck and sweeps her up in his arms as he spins her around as her laughter rings out across the quiet farm. For a moment, the weight he carries seems to lift. But Emma's face grows serious as he sets her down. She tells him about the woman she saw from the school bus that afternoon, stranded on Miller Road with her broken-down car. James confirms he saw her, his expression darkening. Emma plants her small hands on her hips, looking so much like her grandfather in that moment that James's heart aches. She reminds her father of what Grandpa always said, that they help people who need it, because that's what makes them different. That's what makes them good. James looks at his daughter, seeing his late father's eyes staring back at him, hearing his late wife's compassionate heart speaking through their child's words. He sighs, a man defeated by the simple moral clarity of a 9-year-old girl. He tells Emma to get in the truck. Minutes later, they pull up to where Victoria still sits on the grounds beside her dead vehicle, her head in her hands. Her expensive leather bag lies torn open beside her, completely empty. When she hears the truck and looks up, relief floods her features like rain after a drought. James and Emma approach. James asks if she's still there, his tone flat and cautious. Victoria explains that yes, she's still there, that her car simply died, and worse, 2 men came while she was stranded. They took everything, her phone, her wallet, even the rings from her fingers. Emma immediately asks if she's hurt, genuine concern in her young voice. Victoria assures them she's just shaken, though the tremor in her hand suggests it's more than that. James cuts to what he really wants to know. Is she one of those realtors coming around to buy up farms from struggling families? Victoria, caught off guard by the accusation, quickly denies it. She explains she was visiting her godmother in Oak Valley, about 40 miles away, and got lost on the drive back. James presses her,
asking where exactly her godmother lives. Victoria hesitates, just for a moment, before repeating the Oak Valley story. Emma tugs on her father's sleeve, pointing out that 40 miles is far too far to walk, especially as darkness approaches. James studies Victoria's face, searching for deception. Something in her eyes seems genuine, or perhaps it's just exhaustion. Either way, he makes a decision. He tells her it's getting dark, that it's not safe out here, especially after she's already been robbed once. They have a spare room at the farmhouse. She can call someone from there. Victoria's eyes fill with gratitude as she accepts their offer, thanking them over and over. She has no idea that the man extending her this simple kindness is a mechanical engineer who gave up his career and dreams to care for his dying father and pregnant wife, that the woman who would have been his daughter's mother died bringing Emma into the world, that he's been running this farm alone for 9 years while dreaming of the city and the career he left behind. And James has no idea that the woman he's taking home, the woman he thinks might be trying to steal farms from poor families, is Victoria Hayes, only daughter of Richard Hayes, billionaire CEO of Hayes Engineering, the very company that represents everything James once dreamed of achieving.
The Carter farmhouse kitchen is simple but spotlessly clean, a testament to James's determination to give Emma a proper home despite everything they've lost. The walls still hold his father's old farm tools, decorative now, and photos of 3 generations of Carters working this same land. James sets a steaming plate of beef stew in front of Victoria, the recipe his father taught him during those last precious months before the cancer took him. Emma sits across from their guest, watching her with undisguised fascination, as if Victoria is some exotic creature that's wandered into their ordinary world. Emma introduces herself and her father, her 9-year-old formality both endearing and heartbreaking. Victoria introduces herself in turn, thanking them again for their kindness, admitting she doesn't know what would have happened if they hadn't come back for her. James gestures to the old wall-mounted phone, telling her she can try calling her godmother after she eats. Victoria takes a bite of the stew, and her eyes widen with genuine surprise. She tells them it's incredible. James deflects the compliment, explaining it was his dad's recipe, that his father taught him everything about running this farm. Emma, with the brutal honesty of childhood, announces that Grandpa died 2 years ago and that her mommy died when she was born. The words land in the quiet kitchen like stones and still water. Victoria's face fills with sorrow as she offers her condolences. James quickly changes the subject, asking Emma to tell their guest about school. As Emma launches into animated descriptions of her teacher and her best friend and the spelling bee next month, Victoria watches James, the gentle way his whole face softens when he looks at his daughter, the deep sadness that lurks beneath his surface strength, the grace with which he shouldered impossible burdens. Later that night, Victoria lies in the spare bedroom, staring at the ceiling. The bed is simple but comfortable, the borrowed nightgown clean but worn. She thinks about the master suite in her penthouse with its 1,000 thread count sheets and panoramic city views. She thinks about her soon-to-be ex-husband, probably passed out drunk in whatever hotel room he's claiming is home this week. She thinks about the board meetings and the corporate backstabbing and the endless parade of people who smile to her face while plotting to use her family name for their own advancement. And she realizes that in this modest farmhouse, wearing borrowed clothes and eating homemade stew, she feels more at peace than she has in years. The next 3 days unfold like a strange, suspended dream. Victoria tries the wall phone repeatedly, but the lines are down, a common problem in this rural area, especially after recent storms. Sometimes she gets a busy signal, sometimes just dead air, sometimes a recording about service interruptions. Each failed attempt means another day on the farm, and Victoria finds herself hoping, just a little, that the phones stay broken. She watches James work the fields, fascinated by his capability, the way he can fix anything with his hands, the way he knows every inch of this land. Emma takes Victoria under her wing like a determined little teacher, showing her how to feed the chickens without getting packed, how to collect eggs from the henhouse, how to tell when the vegetables in the garden are ready for picking. Victoria, who hasn't done a single chore for herself in years, finds herself laughing genuinely as a hen chases her across the yard.
In the afternoons, while James makes deliveries, Victoria helps Emma with her homework at the kitchen table. She's surprised to discover she's good at this, patient in a way she never knew she could be. Emma soaks up the attention like a flower starved for water, and Victoria realizes with a pang that this little girl has been missing a mother's presence, just as surely as Victoria has been missing any real human connection. On the fourth day, everything shifts. The afternoon sun beats down mercilessly as James works shirtless in the far field, repairing a section of fence that's come down. Sweat glistens on his skin, highlighting muscles earned through years of hard labor rather than expensive gym memberships. His movements are efficient, economical, the product of a man who understands machinery and leverage and how to make his body into a tool. Victoria stands in the barn doorway, ostensibly putting away the egg baskets, but her eyes are fixed on James in the field. She's transfixed by him in a way that has nothing to do with logic or appropriateness, and everything to do with the sudden realization that she hasn't felt desire, real bone-deep desire, in longer than she can remember. Her husband stopped touching her years before the divorce papers were filed. The men at the company see her as a symbol, not a woman. But James, covered in dirt and sweat and completely unaware she's watching, is the most attractive thing she's seen in a decade. Emma appears beside her like a grinning imp, startling Victoria from her reverie. The girl asks point blank if Victoria likes her dad, her voice full of mischief and hope intertwined. Victoria stammers, caught completely off guard, insisting she was just watching him work. Emma, wise beyond her years, grins wider and says simply that Victoria was staring. Victoria laughs embarrassed, her face flushing in a way that has nothing to do with the afternoon heat. Emma's expression grows more serious. She tells Victoria that her dad is the best dad in the whole world, but that he gets lonely sometimes. She's heard him at night, looking at pictures of her mom, and she knows he's sad even though he tries to hide it. The confession is delivered with such earnest concern that Victoria feels her heart break a little for both father and daughter, trapped in their grief and routine, making the best of what life has dealt them. That evening, at dinner, Emma can't contain herself. She announces loudly that Victoria was staring at James when he was fixing the fence that afternoon. James nearly chokes on his water. Victoria's face turns crimson as she vehemently denies it, claiming she was merely appreciating the craftsmanship of the fence repair. Even James cracks a smile as Emma giggles and Victoria covers her face with her hands, mortified, but also, somehow, happier than she's been in years. After Emma goes to bed, James and Victoria find themselves sitting on opposite ends of the worn living room couch, mugs of chamomile tea steaming in their hands. The silence between them isn't uncomfortable, but it's charged with everything they haven't said, everything they've both been feeling, but are too afraid to acknowledge. James apologizes for Emma's bluntness at dinner. Victoria smiles, assuring him that Emma is wonderful, that he's raised her beautifully all alone. The words open something in James, and suddenly the story pours out. His wife Sarah, who didn't survive childbirth, his father's cancer diagnosis that came just weeks before Emma was born, the impossible choice that wasn't really a choice at all. He tells her about his life before, when he was a mechanical engineer in the city with a good job and big dreams, about the innovations he was working on, the trajectory his career was taking. He gave it all up without hesitation to care for his dying father and his pregnant wife, and then, after they were both gone, to raise Emma alone. He admits that sometimes, late at night, he wonders what his life might have been. He dreams about getting back to engineering, about working for one of the big companies like Hayes Engineering, about creating something meaningful that would last beyond him. But Emma needs stability, needs her father present, and so he stays on the farm, tending land and chickens instead of machines and innovations.
Victoria reaches out, touching his hand gently. She tells him with complete conviction that he will get there, that she believes in him. The touch lingers between them, electric and terrifying. James turns the conversation to her, asking about her godmother, who must be worried sick by now. Victoria chooses her words carefully, unwilling to break the spell of these past days with the truth of who she really is. She tells him her marriage recently ended, that her husband drank heavily and didn't love her, barely even liked her. She felt invisible in her own life, she says, her voice breaking slightly. But here, these past few days on the farm, she's felt more seen than she has in years. Their eyes meet across the short distance of the couch. The air between them charges with possibility and danger in equal measure. Victoria leans closer. James starts to pull back, but stops himself. He whispers that he can't do this, that Emma is already getting attached to Victoria, that he has to think about what's best for his daughter. Victoria whispers back that she understands. But neither of them moves away. They sit frozen in that moment, hands still touching, faces inches apart, both terrified of what comes next. The 6th day dawns gray and ominous. By late afternoon, dark clouds roll across the sky like invading armies, and thunder rumbles in the distance. James works frantically to secure the barn and bring the animals in before the storm hits. By evening, rain pounds against the farmhouse windows like thousands of desperate fingers seeking entry. Lightning splits the sky in brilliant, terrifying flashes. Emma, frightened by the violence of the storm, clings to Victoria on the living room couch. Victoria holds her close, stroking her hair and singing softly, a lullaby her own mother sang to her decades ago, before the money and the company consumed everything. Both of them eventually doze off, exhausted by the day. James returns hours later, soaked to the bone from making final checks on the property. He finds them asleep together on the couch, Emma curled into Victoria like a kitten seeking warmth, Victoria's arm wrapped protectively around the little girl. His heart clenches at the sight. It's so achingly close to what he's dreamed of for Emma, a mother's love, a complete family. He lifts Emma first, carrying her small, sleeping form to her bedroom, tucking her in under her favorite quilt with the faded stars. Then he returns for Victoria. As he slides his arms beneath her and lifts, her eyes flutter open. She sees his face close to hers, sees the tenderness in his expression, but some instinct tells her not to break this moment. She keeps her eyes half closed, pretending to still be asleep. James carries her to the spare room, his steps careful and slow. He lays her down gently on the bed, pulling the blanket up over her. For just a moment, he brushes a strand of hair back from her face, his fingers lingering against her cheek. Then, as if catching himself in something forbidden, he pulls his hand back quickly. He stands there for another heartbeat, conflicted and aching, before forcing himself to leave the room. After the door closes, Victoria opens her eyes fully. She touches her cheek where his fingers were, feeling the ghost of that gentle touch. Tears slide silently down her face, because she realizes she's falling in love with this man, this farmer engineer who doesn't know she could buy his farm 1,000 times over, who treats her like a real person instead of a symbol or a bank account. And she has no idea how to tell him the truth without destroying everything. The 7th day breaks clear and bright. The storm washed away like it was never there. Victoria tries the wall phone again, more out of obligation than hope. This time, miraculously, it rings. Maria, the head housekeeper at the Hayes estate, answers. Victoria's heart leaps and sinks simultaneously as she identifies herself and reads off the address from a piece of mail on the counter, telling Maria to inform her father immediately that she's safe.
When she hangs up, she's beaming and crying at the same time. James enters the kitchen and she announces that the phone worked, that her family is coming to get her. James forces a smile, the words catching in his throat as he tells her, "That's great, really great," even though everything in him is screaming that it's not great at all, that he doesn't want her to leave, that these past 7 days have felt more like a real life than the last 9 years combined. That afternoon, Victoria runs out to the fields where James and Emma are planting late-season vegetables. She calls out that they found her, that her family is coming. Emma's small face crumples immediately. She asks why Victoria has to leave, tears welling in her eyes. Victoria kneels down, trying to explain that she has to go home, that her family is worried. But Emma, with devastating simplicity, asks why Victoria can't just stay here with them, why they can't be a family. The little girl runs off toward the house, sobbing. James moves to follow, but Victoria stops him, saying she'll go, that she should be the one. She finds Emma in the barn, crying into a pile of hay. Victoria holds her and tries to explain, but there's no explanation that makes sense to a 9-year-old heart that's just found something precious and is about to lose it. An hour later, Victoria finds James in the tractor shed, working on an old engine with the focused intensity of a man trying to forget his feelings. She brings him a sandwich and lemonade, a simple domestic gesture that somehow feels more intimate than anything else they've shared. He thanks her quietly, wiping grease from his hands.
Victoria sits on a hay bale nearby. The silence stretches between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Finally, she tells him that Emma asked her to stay. James responds flatly that Emma's a kid, that she doesn't understand how the world works. Victoria's voice trembles as she asks, "What if I wanted to stay?" James stops working, turns to look at her fully. He says she has a life to get back to, but there's a question in his voice, a desperate hope he's trying to suppress. Victoria stands, moving closer to him. She asks him, "Do I really have a life? Or do I just have an empty house and people who only care about what I can do for them?" She steps closer still, close enough that he can smell the farm soap she used that morning, close enough to see the vulnerability in her eyes. She tells him that these past few days, she's felt alive, real in a way she hasn't felt in years. He and Emma have given her something she didn't even know she was missing. James whispers her name, half warning, half prayer. She reaches up, touching his face with her clean hand while his are still covered in grease. He leans into her touch, closing his eyes, his careful control crumbling. Then, suddenly, as if a dam has broken, he kisses her. She responds immediately, desperately, both of them pouring 7 days of longing and loneliness into this one moment. They break apart, breathing hard. James begins unbuttoning her shirt with trembling fingers. She helps him with his, their hands fumbling in their urgency. But as he reaches the last button on her blouse, he suddenly stops. His hands freeze. He steps back, shaking his head. Victoria, confused and hurt, asks what's wrong. James, his voice rough with emotion, says he can't do this. She's leaving. Tomorrow, the next day. She'll go back to her real life, and he'll still be here on this farm, and Emma will be heartbroken. He won't take advantage of this moment when he knows how it ends, when he knows she's vulnerable and traumatized and not thinking clearly. Victoria tries to protest, saying he's not taking advantage of anything, but James is adamant. He accuses himself of trying to take advantage of her vulnerability, of being just a farmer who wishes he was something more, someone worthy of a woman like her. He steps back, rebuttoning his shirt with shaking hands. He apologizes and then walks away,
leaving her standing there in the shed. Victoria doesn't cry because he rejected her. She cries because she's just encountered something she thought didn't exist anymore. A man with genuine honor. A man who would sacrifice his own desires to protect her and his daughter. She's crying because she's falling in love with him, and she's been lying to him about who she is, and she has no idea how to fix it. That evening, the three of them sit at the dinner table, but the earlier warmth has been replaced by a heavy, sorrowful silence. Emma pushes food around her plate without eating, her eyes red from crying. James and Victoria avoid looking at each other directly, the memory of the shed hanging between them like smoke. Suddenly, the sound of multiple vehicles approaching shatters the quiet. Not just one car, but several, their engines loud in the rural stillness. James frowns, standing up and walking toward the door. This isn't normal. Nobody comes out here with a convoy. Outside, a line of black SUVs pulls up the dirt drive, looking wildly out of place against the backdrop of the modest farmhouse and weathered barn. Men in expensive suits emerge from the vehicles, moving with the practiced efficiency of professional security. And then, from the lead vehicle, steps Richard Hayes, 60-something, distinguished, commanding, every inch the billionaire CEO he is. Victoria rushes past James, crying out for her father. They embrace in the middle of the yard, and James's confusion deepens into shocked realization as he processes what he's seeing. Richard approaches him, extending his hand with the easy confidence of a man used to being in control. He introduces himself as Richard Hayes, CEO of Hayes Engineering, thanking James profusely for protecting his daughter. James stands frozen, unable to process what he's hearing. Hayes Engineering? The Hayes Engineering? The company he's dreamed of working for his entire career? The company that represents everything he gave up? Victoria is not just wealthy, she's billionaire wealthy. She's not just connected to the company he's dreamed about, she is the company, or will be someday. Victoria tries to approach James, tries to explain that she should have told him, that she wanted to but couldn't find the right moment. James backs away from her as if burned, the betrayal evident on his face. She lied to him. For 7 days she lied, let him pour out his dreams about working for her father's company, never once revealing that she could make those dreams come true with a single phone call. Before Victoria can say more, Emma runs out of the house. She throws her arms around Victoria, begging her not to go, crying out that Victoria can stay and be her mummy, that they can be a family. The word mummy hits Victoria like a physical blow. She kneels down, pulling Emma close, her own tears flowing freely now. Victoria tries to explain to Emma that she has to go, that she has responsibilities, that her father needs her. But even as she says the words, she's looking at James, and they both know she's not just talking about her actual father and her company obligations. She's explaining why she can't stay, why a billionaire heiress can't just abandon her life to play farm wife with a man she's known for 7 days. Emma clings tighter, asking why Victoria has to leave, why she can't just stay forever. Victoria has no answer that will satisfy a 9-year-old heart. James finally moves forward, gently pulling his daughter away from Victoria. He tells Emma that Victoria has her own life, her own family, her own responsibilities. His voice is kind but firm, already trying to help his daughter process the loss that's coming. Richard Hayes watches this scene with sharp, assessing eyes. He's not a stupid man, and he can see the connections between these three people, can read the story in his daughter's tears and the farmer's rigid posture and the little girl's desperate grief. But he also knows his daughter has obligations, a company to help run, a position on the board, a role she cannot simply abandon for a romantic fantasy on a farm. Victoria stands, composing herself with visible effort. She tells James, "Thank you," for everything, though the words are laughably inadequate for what she means. She tells Emma that she'll never forget her, that Emma is the smartest, bravest, kindest little girl she's ever known. Emma just cries harder. The security team begins loading Victoria into one of the SUVs. She looks back at the farmhouse, at James standing with his hand on Emma's shoulder, at the life she glimpsed for 7 perfect days. Then the door closes and the convoy pulls away, leaving dust hanging in the evening air. James and Emma stand in the yard long after the vehicles disappear from view. Emma asks if Victoria will ever come back. James, his voice thick with emotion he's trying to hide, tells his daughter, probably not, that Victoria has her own life in the city, that they should be grateful for the time they had with her. That night, Emma cries herself to sleep. James sits in the living room, staring at the couch where Victoria slept that first night, where he found her and Emma asleep together during the storm. He thinks about the shed, about stopping himself from making love to her, about whether he made the right choice or the most cowardly one. He thinks about how he poured his heart out to her about his dream of working for Hayes Engineering, never knowing she could have made it happen with a word to her father. He feels betrayed and lost and angry, but mostly he just feels empty. The next morning, Emma barely speaks. She goes through her routine mechanically, feeding the chickens, getting ready for school, eating the breakfast James makes. When he drops her off at the bus stop, she doesn't wave goodbye like she usually does. She just climbs the steps and disappears into the bus without looking back. James returns to the farmhouse, to the endless work that needs doing, to the life he chose and the dreams he sacrificed. He tells himself it will get better, that time will heal this wound the way it's healed others. He tells himself that what happened was for the best, that a billionaire heiress and a struggling farmer could never have made it work anyway, that it was just a fantasy born of circumstance. But even as he thinks these things, even as he tries to return to normal, he can't stop seeing Victoria's face when she watched him work in the field. He can't stop remembering how she looked holding Emma, how natural it seemed, how right. He can't stop wondering what might have happened if she'd been honest from the start, if he'd known who she really was. Would he have still fallen for her? Would it have mattered? These questions plague him as he works through the day, fixing what's broken, tending what needs tending, living the life he's built. And he knows, with a certainty that sits heavy in his chest, that something fundamental has changed. 7 days shouldn't be enough time to fall in love, shouldn't be enough time to reimagine an entire future. But somehow, impossibly, it was.
Meanwhile, in the back of a luxury SUV speeding toward the city, Victoria stares out the window at the passing farmland. Her father asks if she's all right, if the farmer treated her well. She assures him that James was nothing but kind, that he saved her when she had nothing. Richard Hayes says he'll make sure the man is properly compensated, that a generous financial gift is the least they can do. Victoria turns to her father, her voice sharp for the first time. She tells him that James Carter doesn't want their money, that he's a man of honor and pride, that a check would insult everything he stands for. Richard raises an eyebrow, hearing something in his daughter's voice he hasn't heard in years. Passion, conviction, genuine feeling. He asks carefully if something happened between Victoria and this farmer. She tells him nothing happened, which is technically true, though everything that mattered happened anyway. She tells her father that for 7 days she lived a real life, that she felt like a real person instead of a symbol or a corporate chess piece. She tells him she wants to go back, that she wants to help James, to give him the career he deserves. Richard Hayes sits back, processing this information. He says carefully that Victoria can't just run away from her responsibilities, from the company, from her position. But maybe there's a way to help James Carter without disrupting everything. Maybe there's a way to do something good here. Victoria looks at her father, hope flickering in her eyes for the first time since they left the farm. And Richard, who built an empire from nothing, who understands ambition and dreams and the sacrifices people make for what they love, nods slowly. He tells his daughter that when they get back to the city, she should have HR pull James Carter's old resume, his old portfolio. If the man is as talented as Victoria believes, if he really is the engineer he used to be, then maybe Hayes Engineering has a position for him. Maybe they can give him back his dream, even if they can't give Victoria back those 7 perfect days. As the convoy speeds toward the city, toward glass towers and board meetings, and the complex machinery of inherited wealth, Victoria presses her hand against the window, looking back at the farmland disappearing behind them. She thinks about Emma calling her mummy, about James stopping himself in the shed, about feeding chickens and planting vegetables, and feeling, for the first time in her adult life, truly useful and truly wanted. She doesn't know if she'll ever see them again. She doesn't know if James will accept her father's help or if he'll be too proud, too hurt by her deception. She doesn't know if Emma will forgive her for leaving, or if that little girl will spend the rest of her childhood remembering the week a stranger came and almost became her mother. But she knows with absolute certainty that those 7 days on the Carter farm were the most real, most honest, most important days of her life. And that has to mean something. That has to count for something. The screen fades to black as the convoy disappears over the horizon, leaving behind a farmer and his daughter trying to piece their hearts back together and carrying away a billionaire heiress who finally understands what she's been missing all along. Not adventure or escape, but simply love, in its most ordinary and extraordinary form.